is Ufona Hime, and I am excited to be part of this Women's Forum where we're gathered together to discuss issues pertaining to our wellness and wealth. I'm most especially thankful to Dawa for providing me the opportunity to speak about a topic I'm so passionate about. I also want to extend my greetings to all the other speakers in today's forum, experts in their own field. Today I'm opportune to discuss about finding wellness amid daily chaos. Now, before I go on to define what wellness is, I want to ask us some questions. And the first is this: how many of you have gone for a physical checkup this year? Something we call yearly physical, where you go to see the doctor, they check your blood levels for things like cholesterol, blood sugar, kidney function, and stuff like that. How many of you? Okay, how many of you have gone for a women's wellness checkup where you have this breast examination done, you get a pap smear done, and things that have to do with the female reproductive organs are checked just to ensure that everything is working fine? How many? Okay, maybe a few. And last but not the least, how many of you have ever gone for a mental wellness checkup? I'm sure nobody's raising their hands, or if any, just a few. Now, this is because we tend to think that mental health is distinct from physical health, and we separate both and think that they are not the same. On the contrary, mental health is an integral part of our well-being. In fact, the World Health Organization says there is no health without mental health. Now, I want to give you a definition of what mental health is by the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization defines mental health as that state of well-being where an individual is capable of realizing his or her abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and contribute to his or her community. Now, embedded in that definition are several components that I want you to take note of: the ability to cope with the stresses of life, the ability to realize your abilities. So when you think about mental health, I want you to think about your cognitive function. Your ability to go to work and earn a living is dependent on the state of your mental health. So my hope is that as we discuss what mental health is, we'll begin to change the perception we have about it, and then perhaps this will also change the behaviors that we tend to engage in relation to our mental health. You see, mental health is not just the absence of mental illness. Many of us like to think about it that way. Just like the absence of illness does not mean that you're physically healthy, mental health actually exists on this continuum, and throughout our lifespan we'll move from one end of the continuum to another. On this end is a state of well-being, mental health well-being, where we're doing awesome and great. And on the other end is where we have mental illnesses and mental health conditions. Now, I want you to think about mental health beyond mental illness, because today we're not going to be discussing mental illness. We're going to be discussing the stresses and the chaos that we experience on a day-to-day basis that make it difficult for us to cope and thrive in our daily lives. Now, before I go on, I want to dispel two myths that we have about mental health. There are several, but I'm going to be focusing on only two. And the first is this: I only need to take care of my mental health if I begin to experience a mental health condition. The fact, however, is that each of us can begin to take active steps to promote our mental well-being. You see, we live in a reactive society. What this means is that we only take action when something has happened. So, for example, you only go to see the doctor after you have treated that headache over and over again and it's still lingering. But there are certain things you can do to prevent the headache from even coming up in the first place, and that is the same with our mental health. When you buy a brand new vehicle, it comes with instructions, right? And in those instructions are rules, and regulations that tell you how that car ought to be maintained. It needs to have an oil change, it needs to have certain things done. If these things are not done, the engine may break down. We don't wait for our car engine to break down before we begin to seek help. We do those things religiously so that we can prevent that. And that's the same with our mental health. The second myth is this: mental illnesses are not common. On the contrary, more than 1 in 10 people worldwide has a mental disorder. Now let's bring it back home, right? In Nigeria, it is estimated that 25 to 30% of Nigerians suffer from a mental disorder. In fact, Nigeria has the highest caseload of depression in all of Africa and ranks 15th in the world when it comes to suicide rate. In recent times, we have seen several headlines of people committing suicide in our country. These were news lines that were not very frequent or common in the past, but in recent times, we are beginning to see it happening over and over again. This is to tell us that something is really going on. You know, mental health has a lot of stigma attached to it, so for the most part, we try to hide it or mask its existence. But even in all that we do, we are still seeing a lot of incidents of mental health issues in our country. So it's important to note that, hey, these things exist and we need to begin to pay attention to them. Now, we're going to be talking about women today. And so even though mental health issues affect both men and women, our topic today is focused on women. And so I'll be emphasizing certain things that have to do with women. Now, some of you may ask, why are we even doing this? I want to give you some reasons why mental health is important to you. Like I mentioned before, your cognitive abilities is a result of your mental health. Every day, even right now that you're sitting and watching and listening to me, is because you're in a mental state that is capable of receiving the information that is coming from my mouth. Your ability to connect with individuals and develop relationships is dependent on your mental health. Your ability to thrive and, have meaning in your life is dependent on your mental health. And that is why we're giving it attention. And it's my hope that you'll begin to give it the attention that it deserves in your life moving on from today. Now, we're not going to be discussing about mental illness in today's forum. We're going to be talking about the stresses that we experience on a normal daily basis that impacts our well-being. And so I'm going to be talking about stress and how we can mitigate or reduce its impact on our well-being. So what is stress? Stress is anything that results in a change in your physical and emotional or psychological well-being, meaning that it brings about strain in each of these areas that I have mentioned. You see, stress is when your body responds to something that requires action or attention. It is your body's ability to respond to a perceived threat or danger, something we call the fight or flight response. Now, the fight or flight response usually prepares our body to respond to that perceived threat or danger by either fighting it or running away from it. Now, during that period, certain hormones are released into our body, such as adrenaline and cortisol, that prepare us to fight or to flee. And so we see things like increased heart rate, our digestion slows, and then blood is being pumped to the major muscles in our body so that we have the energy to be able to either fight or run away. Now, when that perceived threat or danger seems to have dwindled or disappeared, our body returns to normal function via the relaxation response. Now, in a normal circumstance, this is what's supposed to happen. But when you experience constant stress, when you have chronic stress, this relaxation response is not able to occur as often as it ought to, leading and keeping the individual in a constant state of flight or fright, making a big negative impact on their well-being and their body. Now, the medical experts in our midst today will attest to the fact that stress is a predisposing factor to several illnesses such as heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes, and even cancer. So it's important that we begin to pay attention to stress. Remember, stress, a short period of stress is normal. We're going to experience it every day. However, when we experience chronic stress, that is what begins to impact us physically and mentally. Now, what is psychological stress? Psychological stress is that emotional strain that you experience as a result of activities or events in your life. And this usually comes with several emotions such as frustration, anger, sadness, irritability. Take, for example, you're on your way home and this ride is supposed to last just 15 minutes, but you've been in a holdup for 1 hour. How do you think you feel? Angry, frustrated, so much that if somebody just comes and cuts in front of you, what do you find yourself doing? Honking that horn, insulting, or even cursing the person. There's a build-up as a result of the stressor that you're experiencing that's causing you psychological stress. Now, women and men experience stress and psychological stress on a daily basis, but I want to highlight some of the things that are peculiar to women that predisposes them to experience stress. Number one, marital difficulties. When you're in a relationship that where one individual is focused on making the marriage work while the other individual is not, or both parties don't even want to work at making that marriage work, it brings about a lot of strain. Now we live in a society where the burden of the success of the marriage lies on the woman. The woman is told, make your marriage work. Your mother says, go back home and apologize. Make sure, I don't want to hear that you people are having problem. And it is impossible to make a marriage work when only one party is willing to make it work. So this brings about a lot of stress on women. And we see many women down and the shadow of themselves, what they used to be when they were single, now that they are married. So marriage difficulties, economic situations. More women have financial difficulties than men, and this is because of a lot of reasons which we're not going to go in today. And this financial difficulty usually predisposes women to other ills and vices. For example, a woman is more likely to sell her body to get money to provide food for her family than a man is. So this is another issue. We have childbearing. Now this opportunity to bring forth life is a beautiful thing, but it comes with its own stress. A woman bringing forth life can experience so much stress that some people experience postpartum depression, some people experience postpartum psychosis, and then the very fact of having the responsibility to raise that child and still carry on other activities can become so overwhelming that women begin to break down under the enormous weight that they're experiencing. Body image. We live in a time now where society tells us how we should look as women, and this was different a decade ago, a century ago, and it is constantly changing. And for many of us, we're not as slim as we were in our 20s or 30s. No matter how much we try to eat right or exercise, we find that we're in a constant struggle to maintain the right figure that society says is expected of us. And so when we look at these other beautiful women online, we begin to feel terrible. We don't like ourselves, and because we don't like ourselves, it affects our self-esteem. We begin to avoid places where women are gathered, right? Because we don't want to be seen as the overweight one. And so that leads to isolation. We begin to deny and reject several opportunities to gather together and engage in social gatherings because of how we feel about ourselves. Now, there are many other stressors that can cause a woman to experience chronic stress, but these are the few that I'm going to mention. I want to emphasize now that women are more likely than men to experience anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. This is because women are disproportionately victims of sexual violence than their male counterpart. Now, if you have experienced any adverse childhood experience, you're more likely to be a victim of you're more likely to come down with a mental health disorder. And that is why it's important that even though your past you experienced certain things in your past, there are certain things you can begin to do now to mitigate the impact of that exposure towards your current mental well-being. So how do you know that something is going on with you? That's very important, right? What are those signs and symptoms to be on the lookout that tell you that something is going on? I'm going to be mentioning a few of them. This is not an exhaustive list. Number one, there's this constant feeling of worry and anxiety. You're anxious about going out. You're anxious that your child may fall sick. You're anxious that you may lose your job. Every single thing, with something we call generalized anxiety disorder, you're worried or fretting about every single thing, and this continues for a specific period of time. Remember, it doesn't just happen in 1 day or 2 days and then dissipates. We're talking about symptoms that last more than 2 weeks for depressive symptoms and more than 6 months for anxiety symptoms. Number two, this constant persistent feeling of sadness or depression. And when I talk about depression, I'm talking about a loss of energy. You don't have energy to do anything. You don't longer find interest in the activities that used to interest you before, that you used to love engaging in. These things are no longer bring a smile to your face. You just want to sleep all day, every day. And even though you have 16 hours of sleep, you wake up still feeling exhausted and tired. These are symptoms of depression. Or you become highly irritable and just want to self-isolate. Another symptom to be on the lookout for are changes in your weight. Now, you may either gain a lot of weight or lose a significant amount of weight. And this is important because certain people utilize eating as a coping strategy, and we'll talk about that later on. And so when you begin to take in a lot of food and you begin to see that you're putting on more kilograms than you were, maybe in a short span of time, say 6 months, you've gained 10 to 15 kg. something is definitely going wrong. And this can be said also about your sleep. You're either sleeping for significant hours in a day, say 12, 13, 14 hours, or you're finding it very difficult to fall asleep or stay asleep. This too is a sign that something is wrong. Another sign to be on the lookout for is this feeling of worthlessness. You just say, I don't feel good, I don't matter to anybody. People will be better off if I did not even exist. I mean, if I were to end my life today, nobody is even going to miss me. Of what point am I living? Or what is the use of my life, currently? Those feelings, those thoughts are a sign that there is something more going on beneath. And last but not the least is substance use. We live in a society where we take alcohol. Some people smoke weed. We consider this recreational. Some people say they're social drinkers. However, when you begin to notice that you have to take increasing number of bottles of beer or glasses of wine in order to just feel normal or function normally, then that's a sign that something is wrong. If you can't go to bed without a bottle of beer or smoking something, whether it be weed or cocaine or whatever, it is a sign that something is wrong. We are not supposed to be dependent on substances in order to function normally. So when we begin to be dependent on them, it is an indicator that something is definitely wrong and we need to begin to pay attention to them. So what are those things that we as women can do to improve our mental well-being and so that we can begin to thrive and not just survive? I'm going to mention a few. And remember, again, this is not an exhaustive list. Number one, eat healthy. There's a connection between your gut and your brain. So what you put inside your body will determine how your brain functions. And because your brain is responsible for regulating your emotions, not your heart, like we like to say, it is important that we give it healthy food. Now, in Nigeria, a sign of affluence is your ability to eat out, right? But we have to ask ourselves, all the processed food we are eating, how is it helping us? Is it detrimental to our well-being? It's important that we get back to cooking food like we used to do in the past, and so that we can eat foods that are rich in vitamins and all the nutrients that are necessary to feed our brain so it can function at its optimum. Number two, physical activity. This cannot be overstated. Physical activity is necessary for a healthy well-being. Now, many of you may say, I'm so busy that I don't have time to do that. What you make a priority, you will find time for. That's all I can say about that. I usually encourage my clients, hey, don't make big goals like, oh, I want to run a marathon, I want to exercise 1 hour every day of the week. You can start small, 10 minutes a day, 3 times a week. Now, as you become constant in that 10 minutes, you can increase it to 12 to 15 minutes and just ensure that every day you're engaging in some form of physical activity. Technology has provided us with so many benefits, has made our lives easier, but it has come at a price, and that is sedentary living. Many of us are sedentary, and we no longer participate in any physical activity. And now, more than ever, people are dying from non-communicable diseases than they are from malaria, typhoid, and all the things that used to plague us in 2 or 3 decades ago. So get active. Number 3, form strong, healthy social relationships. And the emphasis is on healthy, right? We are social beings, and we have not been created to live in isolation. There are people who pride themselves saying, I don't have any friends. That's not something to be proud about. The reason for developing strong relationships is not just because of the benefit you get from getting to talk to somebody, but it also serves as a social support system so that when you are down and out, you have somebody who can pick you up, right? There's a verse in the Bible that says 2 are better than 1, right? If one falls, the other person will pick them up. And so it is essential that we form good, healthy habits. Now, we have thousands of friends on social media platforms. These are not the kind of relationships I'm talking about. I'm talking about being deliberate about forming relationships with people in person. I know what I'm feeling. You know what I'm feeling. You know my struggles. You know my pain. You can't have a friend who doesn't know that you haven't eaten in 5 days. That is not a friend. That's what we have on social media, right? We need people who will know us for who we are, who will be able to tell when we are down, who can cheer us up, and who can also support us when things are going well with us. So strong, healthy relationships. Don't make friends with people who will drain you. How many of you have people who you speak with and after the conversation you just feel overwhelmed and drained, like, oh Lord, all my energy has been sapped. You need to try to reduce the amount of times you have with such individuals. Form relationships with people who will build you and who you can also build. Number 4, find healthy ways of managing stress. Now, what are some ways we manage stress most times? We look for the easy way, and they are unhealthy for the most part. What happens with those unhealthy coping strategies is that they give us this instant relief, right? And that's what we're looking for. Like when you go and eat ice cream or you eat donut, you feel relieved in the moment, but it doesn't last long. Healthy coping strategies may not provide you with immediate relief, but they have long-lasting effect. So instead of taking that bottle of wine, instead of eating that food, instead of going binge shopping, right? Some of us like to shop and spend money we don't have so that we just feel excited. They say women like to spend, so that's something that I think is more common in women than men. I want you to begin to develop healthier ways of coping with your stress. How about going for a walk? Calling a friend that will listen to you. Taking a bath, right? You just soak yourself with Epsom salt for 30 minutes or so. Just release all the stress of that. How about engaging in art if you are one who likes to draw or things like that? Or singing, dancing, or even creating music. There are several healthy ways to cope with stress that we need to begin to utilize when we experience this downside during the day. And then number 5 is sleeping. There was a time people used to say, millionaires and people who are making money sleep for only 4 hours a day. If you're sleeping for more than 4 hours a day, you're not serious about making money. On the contrary, sleep is vital to your mental well-being and your overall well-being, in fact. It is one thing that humans have not been able to cheat. It doesn't matter how long somebody goes without sleep, they will eventually cave in and fall asleep. It is essential for the body to function effectively. Therefore, I want to encourage you, instead of staying up all late into the night, 12 midnight, 1 midnight, watching television, watching that series, or scrolling through Instagram, how about you put your phone down and get a good night's sleep? It's important to also have a sleep routine, meaning you go to bed at the same time every day, so your body knows that immediately it's time to go to sleep. Avoid taking caffeine after 12 noon because caffeine is a stimulant. Make sure your room is as dark as possible because darkness causes the release of melatonin, which is responsible for initiating sleep. So ensure that you get sufficient sleep. And last but not the least is seek professional help when you think you can't do this on your own. There is a limit to which coping strategies may help you navigate the stresses of daily life, but I want to say that it's important for you to seek help when you begin to feel overwhelmed. Now, you don't take your car to your best friend who doesn't know anything about cars or to anybody else to fix. You go to an expert, someone who knows how to fix that brand of car to get it fixed. How much more when it comes to our mental health? We need to do the same. It's okay to talk to your pastor, it's okay to talk to your imam or your best friend, but they are limited in the amount of suggestions and treatment options that they can offer to you. Now, if you don't only pray when you have cancer, prayer should not only be the treatment regimen for mental issues. You need to go and ask your doctor, seek a mental health professional out and let them help you. One thing I want to tell us women is this: we need to be able to say no. This is very vital because as women, we are charged with the responsibility of taking care of everybody else, so much that we put their welfare above our own. It is less likely that anybody is going to ask you how you're doing and really care about how you're doing. You are the one responsible for yourself. So you need to be able to say no to when you feel they're overwhelmed with tasks. You need to be able to tell your husband no, to tell your children no, your in-laws, your parents, your boss, I can't take more than I already have on my plate. It's important that you prioritize the tasks that you have on hand and see which ones need to be done so that you can focus on those ones. And anything that doesn't need immediate attention can be moved to the next day. Don't make another person's emergency your emergency. Learn to say no and set healthy boundaries. Now, why am I saying this? Just like when you're in the plane, they tell you, put the oxygen first on your face, oxygen masks first for yourself before you help another individual. It is because you are less likely to give optimal care to anybody if you yourself are not thriving mentally or physically. So ensure that your well-being becomes your number one priority. And when you take care of yourself, you're better able to take care of the people who depend on you for their own well-being. I'm going to be a QR code is going to be showing up right now, and when you scan that QR code, it will lead you to a resource that I'm giving everyone free today. That resource is going to help you identify your current stressors, right, and then come up with a plan to be able to mitigate them and manage them so they are not overwhelming you on a daily basis. It is my hope and desire that women will begin to take care of themselves, not just physically, not just wanting to look beautiful outwardly, but also ensuring that inwardly they are thriving and they are doing well. You know, you can mask your what you're experiencing inside by putting on makeup, putting on the wig, wearing the most expensive clothes. But the reality is that sooner or later, what you don't take care of within will eventually show outwardly. How about we prevent mental illness from becoming our norm, the norm in our lives, by taking the necessary steps to prevent it from coming into pass? It is my hope that this little discussion will elicit something in you so that you will begin 2024 on a different note, making mental well-being your priority so that you will not just survive, but also thrive. Thank you once again for this opportunity, and I'm open to any questions that any of you may have to ask. I really do hope to speak into every one of you again some other time. Bye. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Higher Living Today. Today I'm going to be talking about how we can set goals to achieve our mental health desires. Now many times we have this view or this perception about what we would like to see, right? Some people say, I want to be happier, I want to feel less depressed, I want to be in control of my finances. Now, whatever the issue is or whatever the desires are that you have, setting goals that are smart will be vital in seeing that those things you desire come to pass. So I'm going to be talking about how we can set SMART goals. It's an acronym, SMART, meaning that the goals that you'll be setting will be SMART, and each of these letters represent specific things that we need to look out for when we're setting goals, especially when we're setting goals for our mental health. So let's break them down. So S stands for specific. Now when you're saying you're going to set a goal for your mental health, what is that goal? So many people I want to be happier. We want to be very specific. S stands for specific. What does happy look like for you? That's the first question you have to ask. What does happy look like for you? Who are the people, or what are those things that will need to happen for me to be happy? So it's very necessary that you be specific about the goal that you want to achieve. Number 2 is M, measurable. Now, if you just say, I want to be happy, how are you going to know when you're happy? So we want to not just be specific about our goal, but we want to make goals that are measurable. So instead of, let's take for example, someone says, I want to be happy. Now, how can we make that a very specific goal that we can measure? All right, if happy means that I have paid off all my debt and I have some money in my savings account, then the goal will be, I want to pay off all my credit card debt. All right, because I know that when I do that, that will equate happiness for me. So that's specific. Now, it's also measurable. Why? Because I will know that I have achieved this goal when all my debt, my credit card debt, are paid off. So it's specific and then it's measurable. Number 3 is A. A means attainable. How is possible are these goals that I'm setting for myself? Are they things that I can attain on my own without the involvement of any third party? Because remember, you cannot control what someone else will do. You can only control what you can do. So is it attainable? Now let's take, for example, paying off my debt will equate happiness for me, and I have identified that I can measure this, because when my debts are paid, then I know that, okay, that's going to make me happy. Now, is this attainable? We have to look at the debt that you have. if you have a $50,000 debt or a $20,000 debt, do you think it's going to be attainable for you to pay off that debt? So we need to make goals that are attainable. So that's a question you have to ask yourself. Then R means relevance. Sometimes people say realistic for R. How relevant is this goal to your overall value and sense of self? So someone might like say, okay, paying off my debt is relevant to me because I hold the value of being debt free. That is a value that I hold very dear. So when I pay off my debt, it is going to mean that I can hold true to say that this is a value of mine. I am who I say I am because I owe nobody, right? So it is relevant. So you have to ask yourself, is my goal relevant? Some people may say, I want to buy a Lamborghini, or I want to win the lottery, $1 million in the lottery. How relevant is that goal to your overall sense of being and sense of self? So it has to be specific, it has to be measurable, it has to be attainable. Is winning the lottery an attainable goal? Something you need to think about. And then it has to be relevant. And then T stands for time bound. Time. Every goal has to have a time limit in which it will be achieved. Now, that's why, for example, when you say, okay, I'm going to pay off $50,000 in 1 year. When we ask ourselves, is it attainable? We also have to ask ourselves, is 1 year enough time for me to pay off $50,000? When I look at my income and how much I earn on a monthly basis. So that will tell you whether that time frame is sufficient or not. However, if you leave or do not include any time frame, chances are that you will continue to say, oh yeah, I'm still working on it, I'm still working on it. And any goal that doesn't have a time frame for which it will be accomplished within is less likely to be accomplished. So it has to be specific, it has to be measurable, it has to be attainable, relevant, and time bound. Now, it's important that when you're creating time bounds for your goals, that you are realistic about how much time it will be, how much time is needed for you to achieve that goal. If you, for example, you plan all this out, right? And say, okay, I earn $250,000 a year. So if I look at my budget and you do the numbers, I should be able to pay off $50,000 of debt in 1 year. Sometimes other things can happen that may shift that time frame and not allow your goal to be achieved within the specific time frame, but that is still okay because you made that goal. You're also able to adjust it based on unknown circumstances or unforeseen circumstances that may have come to impact your goal. So I want you today to pause and say, in my journey of achieving a healthy mental state, what are the goals that I'm setting for myself? Am I engaging in wishful thinking, waiting that, oh, if my husband changes his ways, I'll be happy. Or if I get a promotion at work, then I'll be happy. Those things will remain wishful thinkings until we become very specific about what happiness looks like for us, what we intend to achieve, as opposed to get to that place of being happy, and what are the things that are needed for us to achieve those goals. So I want you to look at your life now. Are you down? Are you depressed? Are you in financial debt? Do you have very little social support? Some people don't have social support. They say they want to make new friends. What are those things that you know will make you get to the place that you want to be? It is time that you begin to work on setting smart goals, okay? Setting smart goals. And I'll be leaving a link to a resource on on a smart goal sheet that you can download and begin to work on those smart goals of yours, so that at the end of the time you have prepared for yourself or determined that you will be able to achieve this goal, you can go look back and do some reevaluation and say, how far have I come and where am I now and what do I need? If I haven't achieved that goal, what do I need to do to get to where I want to be? So it's my hope that this will be helpful for anyone who is working on getting better, and that creating smart goals will become the motivation that you need to get you started. I'll see you soon. Have a wonderful day. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Higher Living Today. Today I'm going to be talking about communication in our relationships with emphasis on nagging. You see, research has actually shown that many of the psychological distress that we experience as humans originate from the relationships that we're in. So today we're going to look at something that is quite important that many people experience on a daily basis. And when you hear the word nagging, what comes to mind? Most times it's usually in response to an individual, repeatedly telling you something that you have to do that you haven't done, or you find yourself being the one nagging, repeatedly telling your partner or a child to do something, and then they continue to resist your request to complete that task. So we're going to find out, why do we nag, and how can we overcome the propensity or the desire or the need to nag. And then we're also going to look at the other side of the coin. How do we get things done so that our partner doesn't have to repeatedly remind us to do these things? Now, I want you to come to this video with an open mind, meaning that you're not coming here to look for reasons to accuse your partner for the things that you're doing. Oh, yes, my partner is a nag. But I want you to come to this, to watch this video with the mind of, what am I? Am I the one who nags, or am I the one who is being nagged at? And how can I change my behavior so that I can bring about more cohesion between me and my partner? So today I'm going to be doing a lot of reading, okay? I want to give you specific definitions. And so I'm going to be reading from the paper that I have in front of me. I'm going to look at quite a number of things. But let's start with this. Why do people nag? Well, the answer is because they have told somebody that they need something done and that individual hasn't done it. So the issue now is, why hasn't that individual done what they said, what was asked of them? Well, most times it's because the individual wants to do it at their own time, or does not think it's as important to them as it is to the individual requesting it to be done. So you see that when these two things happen simultaneously, nagging is usually the result. Because when I ask you to do something and you don't do it, then I repeat it again and you still don't get to do it, what happens? I begin to get frustrated, right? And then I repeat it, and then the third time I'm repeating it, most likely not in a nice way, and then the individual who is being told what to do begins to form some form of resistance. Why do you keep bothering me about this? So we're going to take a look at what nagging is, and then we'll see how we can overcome it, and how we can also be the people who respond promptly to the needs of our partners. So it says, nagging is a repetitious behavior in the form of pestering, hectoring, harassing, or otherwise continuously urging an individual to complete repeated discussed request or act on advice. Now, it's important to note that nagging usually occurs in family settings. You don't normally hear people talk about people nagging at work, right? Nagging doesn't usually occur with acquaintances. You don't nag somebody on the road or that you just met. And this is why it's quite important for us to be able to understand why it happens only for the most part in the domestic setting. It says it occurs among family members in an attempt to accomplish the everyday necessary task of family life. You see, the focus of nagging is typically something that is important to the nagger, okay, that's the person requesting, but not important to the person being nagged. So we have to see that the differences that occur in the situation. Let me go on. It says the nagger does not really want the person being nagged to suffer harm. And that's quite important, because many times you hear people say, oh, my wife nags a lot, my husband nags a lot. And it comes across as if they're doing this to make you feel frustrated. They're just out to ruin your day. On the contrary, for the most part, they're seeking your good. And so they're asking you to do something that they feel is in the best interest of maybe not just you, but the family at large. Okay? So why is it that women are usually labeled nags? Every time you hear of the word nag, and I want to use this, in the Bible, every time we hear the word nagging used, is usually in correspondence to a woman or a woman is in the picture. So we hear of Solomon saying it is better to live on the rooftop than to live in the house with a contentious woman. You see the story of Samson and Delilah, how she persuaded him and nagged him until he was vexed in his spirit, and he eventually told her the secrets to his power. We also see the story in the New Testament where the widow continued to go to that unjust judge, and he said, oh, before this woman wears me out with her request, let me just grant her her desires. So why is it that women tend to nag? Even though some men nag, but why is it that women tend to nag? Well, research has actually shown that because nagging occurs in the domestic setting, right? And it's usually associated with getting tasks in the house done. And we know that women are the ones that are responsible for most of the upkeep in the home. It is more likely that women tend to carry the burden of taking care of the home. And so they are the ones usually in charge of ensuring that things get done. So for the most part, they will find themselves in that position, having to tell their partner, having to tell their children what to do. And when this is not done, then they repeat it, and then they repeat it again and again, and before you know it, their termed nags. All right? So let me read what it says here. Women are more likely to be nags than men, and this is partly because they are conditioned to feel more responsible for managing the home and are more likely to notice when things go wrong, okay? That women are labeled nags may result from the interplay, this is another reason, from the interplay between men's and women's styles, whereby many women are inclined to do what is asked of them, and many men are inclined to resist even the slightest hint that anyone, especially a woman, is telling them what to do. And as you think about this, I want you to ask yourself, what's the situation in my home? Do I continuously resist my wife's request to do something because I feel that I want to be in charge of my decisions and what I do? If that's the case, then you are contributing to her being a nag, okay? So a woman will be inclined to repeat a request that doesn't get a response because she is convinced that she really wants him to do it. But look at it. But a man who wants to avoid feeling that he's following orders may instinctively wait before doing what she asked in order to imagine that he is doing it of his own free will. This is funny, but this is usually the case for most people. And the reverse can be the case where the man is the one telling the woman to to do something repeatedly, and she is saying, no, I'm going to do it on my own time. But for the most part, this is what happens. And when we live in a society where the man tends to be in charge, women tend to find themselves in the position of having to request over and over for things to be done. And then the men, because of certain ideology, feel that I can't be responding to a woman's beck and call at any time. I'm going to do it at my own time. And sometimes when they are just about to do it, the woman reminds them again. And so they resist again and hold back. So increasing the time span for that action to be taken. All right. Now let us look at something else. Nagging has a tone of complaint. So when you tell someone to do something the first time, okay, that's a request. When you tell them to do it the second time, it's a reminder. By the third time, you're already getting irritable, all right? And I want you to be sincere to yourself if you're one who nags. You become irritable. So nagging has a tone of complaint, sometimes mounting to anger. And the nagging person usually attributes their resentment to some failure by the other person living up to principles of good conduct. So instead of directly saying what you want and need, all right, one may decide to whine and nag about what they aren't getting. And this is why we're going to come up to the things that we need to do to change this behavior of nagging so that we can communicate effectively and have more peace in our homes. Now, look at the downsides of nagging in our relationships. Nagging lessens intimacy. It seldom works, okay? I know I mentioned two instances where it worked in the Bible, the woman with the unjust judge and Delilah and Samson. It eventually worked, but for the most times it seldom works. So it's not worth it. It breeds resentment. If somebody continuously tells you over and over and over what to do, you're less likely to be attracted to that person or even want to sit and discuss with that person. So the nagging pattern demonstrates our
our belief that if what we're doing isn't working, the solution is to do more of it. And think about that. That doesn't make any sense. If I've told you 2 times and I keep repeating my statement and it's not making you to move, I need to come to terms with the fact that that way of doing it is not working, and change my approach. But for the most part, when we continue to nag, we're saying that, okay, I will continue to do what I'm doing even though I know it's not working. And we all know that that is not a wise thing to do. So let me give some reasons how you can actually know that what nagging is taking place. And I want to say this before I move on, that nagging, that when you nag, it's a sign that mutual caretaking is not happening. So this means that you and your partner are not on the same page. You are not concerned about one another's needs, because if your partner tells you to do something and you're refusing to do it, you're not considering their interest, okay? And if you are insisting that things are done at your own time frame and not putting into consideration the needs of the other person, you are not also putting their interest at heart. So let me see some signs that you are nagging, okay? Let me read them out. Number 1, you're increasingly frustrated because you're not getting through to your partner despite asking again and again. Number 2, your partner becomes increasingly defensive each time you ask for something. Number 3, the things that bother you tend to grow in scope. So you're more bothered by more things more often. Now, your irritation is contagious, okay? The more irritated you get, the more irritated your partner gets. When you see this happening, you know that nagging is taking place. Now, another point is this: the weakness in your relationship, such as what your partner isn't doing, despite your attempts at affecting change, becomes the focus rather than the strength in your relationship. And this is when things can really go sour. When we choose to focus on the things that are not working, that our partner is not doing, we magnify it, and it becomes the whole, our thought becomes obsessed with this one thing that they are not doing, that we forget the other good things that our partner does for us on a daily basis. And the more we focus on their weaknesses, the more resentment we begin to experience, the more anger and dislike we have for this individual, and that tears at the fabric of the relationship. Another point is this: the more obvious signs that you tend to nag is that if you've said the same thing in 5 different ways, 5 different times, and yet you keep going on. So if I tell my husband, can you cut the grass tomorrow? He said, yes, I'll do it. Tomorrow is here, all right? Tomorrow becomes today, and it's 5 p.m. and I remind him, oh, can you cut the grass? He said, oh, yes, I'll do it. The 3rd time, maybe that's 2 days later, I'm already getting irritated. You said you were going to cut the grass 2 days ago and you haven't cut it. You see, my tune has changed. And before you know it, the response is likely, so you want to tell me that I haven't been doing anything all this while? Have I just been sitting down doing nothing? And before you know it, that translates into an argument. So we need to be cautious about when we are nagging and how we can stop and do something different. So what are some tips that we can use to stop nagging, okay? And to also stop being less likely to respond to the needs of our partner. Remember, there are 2 people in play here: the person who consistently asks for something to be done, and the individual who consistently resists or refuses to do the thing that has been asked of them on a timely manner. So number 1, negotiate a new plan. Okay, you and your partner sit down, negotiate a new plan. It can be with your partner, it can be with your children. The person who nags can ask for deadlines, and the person who is being nagged at can ask for reminders. So if I tend to nag, which is usually the case in my situation, I can say, okay, hey, Joseph, tell me when you think you will be able to have the grass cut. And he'll give me a specific date. And because he is the one who usually tends to, lag on responding to my request, he can ask me for reminders. All right, can you remind me 5 p.m. tomorrow evening? Now, because he's telling me to remind him at 5 p.m. tomorrow, when I do remind him, he is less likely to become angry and annoyed about my reminder, because he was the one who requested it. So he has or feels some sense of autonomy in the decision making, okay? Number 2, Don't insist that a task be done on your schedule. This is very important, and that is why many times we find ourselves nagging a lot, because we want something to be done 2 p.m. tomorrow, and if it's not done 2 p.m. we are annoyed when that thing can actually be done at another time and things will still be okay. Now, if you look at the situation, you say, what's the difference between this task being done today or being done over the weekend? If there is no significant difference, how about you just let it be at the schedule of the individual you're asking to help you with the task? So don't insist that the task be done on your own time. Now, assign chores based on personal priorities, which is very important. If something is of priority to you and is not a priority to your spouse, how about you take up that chore? Let me give you an example. In my case, I like a clean house. I love a clean bathroom. If I go into the bathroom or the shower and I find any stains, I start by washing it before I even take my bath. Now, there was a time I used to want my husband to clean the shower, wash the shower or scrub it. And oh my goodness, it will infuriate me. Oh, can you wash it? Can you? And it never got done. And I get so angry. Can't you see the stains? And so I decided, okay, I'm going to take up that chore. Washing the shower is going to be my responsibility. So assign chores based on personal responsibility, because priority. Because if it's a priority to you, you do it. If it's a priority to them, they're more likely to do it. He likes cutting grass. It's a priority to him. Nobody has to remind him to cut the grass. So he goes and he cuts it at his own time because it's a priority to him. All right. No, don't stay on the sidelines. You've asked somebody to do something and then you're on the sidelines and you say, no, it's not wrong. You should do it this way. That is so annoying. All right. If you want something done your way, do it yourself. As simple as that. If you want it done your way, do it yourself. Number 5, be specific about what you want and don't make vague requests. Let me give you another reminder. I can go into the bathroom and I see that the bathroom is dirty. Instead of saying, hey, babe, can you help me wash the shower? It's dirty. I could say things like, wow, the bathroom is dirty. Have you noticed that? And you're like, no, I haven't noticed that. And then you get angry. Why are you angry? That's not a request. It's a vague request. So if you want something to be done, be very specific about what it is you want done. Okay? Make one request and then move on to consequences. And this usually works well with kids. So if I tell my kid, you go clean your room, and I've told them that their rooms need to be cleaned by the end of Saturday evening. If it's not cleaned by the end of Saturday evening, then I need to move on to consequences. It's futile to tell them over and over and over again, go clean your room, go clean your room. You become a nag. All right, so let them know that, okay, every task has to be done, and if a task is not done, there is a consequence. You lose TV time or something else happens. So when you make a request, then move on to consequence. I must admit that this is quite difficult and challenging when it has to do with partners who share equal rights or authority in the relationship. So we have to find out, okay, what can I do? If I've made a request and I've repeated it, what's the next action to take? Certainly not repeating it over and over again. Number 7, maximize gratitude. Every time you feel overwhelmed and frustrated that your partner or your spouse or your children are not doing what you have asked them to do, think about the other times when they actually did and fulfilled your needs and all the other things that they actually do without you even asking them, and be grateful for them. It's also important to forgive. You see, these are attributes and virtues that are important in any relationship. And if we are to communicate effectively and reduce the psychological distress that comes from poor communication and the resentment and the anger that comes when we feel that our needs are not being met, we need to forgive, just like you would want to be forgiven if you erred. And last but not the least, seek more productive ways to communicate. And I'll be talking about that in another video. So many times we come into relationships with learned behaviors, ways that we thought were, or maybe not even thought, but ways we have communicated in the past, and these are not healthy ways. So when you want to foster a relationship and benefit from it, we have to say, what are more ways, what are better ways to communicate? Perhaps you need to time the moment you make your request. If your spouse is busy and they're having a difficult day, maybe that's not the time to remind them that they need to do the laundry, okay? If they're going through a difficult period or, mourning the loss of someone or something, maybe that's not the right time to bring up a request. So we have to be sensitive and seek for better ways to communicate. Emotional intelligence would demand that you know what your partner is feeling at that moment and what would be the most appropriate time to bring up a request. So I want to ask a question before we close. Are you a nagger? Are you the one who nags? Or are you the one who is constantly being nagged? And whatever position or title you hold, I want to tell you that it is possible for you to bring about change. We don't need to continue to communicate in ineffective ways. We can do better so that we can thrive, not just thrive in our relationships, but thrive when it comes to our mental health. I'll see you next week.